years, and all that jazz. I'm your host, Jasmine Lisciotto, and today we're starting where it all began, at the beginning. In today's episode, I'll be taking you through the first 15 years of my life, how I grew up in a loving home, but also had the complexities of my dad's battle with bipolar. This story is going to be based on love, but also the challenges that come with growing up in a household that was shaped by mental illness. Most of my earliest memories are full of love. I grew up in a beautiful home with my parents and my siblings. My mum was amazing. She always made sure we had everything we needed, beautiful meals on the table, and encouragement and support for our dreams. My dad, when he was going well, was a great dad. He was kind, attentive, and wanted nothing more than to see us happy and do our best. For me, we were always lucky. I never look back as the whole lot of my childhood being a traumatic experience. My siblings and I are really close, which was always really fun growing up because there's four of us. We grew up, we got to play sport, we went on family holidays, and we were just being kids. It wasn't perfect, but what family is, right? We had so much love and support around us, and I think that's what really got us through. Looking back, there were so many happy memories. I remember growing up where we lived, playing outside, down at the lake, going on adventures in the bush, going for bushwalks, just all the small moments. I'll forever be grateful of the foundation of love that my parents gave us, even in the darkest days. I've always been encouraged to pursue my dreams and do my best, and I've carried this with me throughout my life. A big part of the way I believe in that is the way that my dad instilled self-belief in me. That's really what's got me to where I am today. But even in those early years, there was something wrong. I knew that something was different about my dad. He wasn't like other dads. I just couldn't understand it. For me, I've always been really sensitive to people's energy. The energy around me, I really take in. And with my dad, there were days where he just wasn't himself. He'd be quiet, withdrawn, and there was so much tension in the house. I could feel it. Oftentimes, we didn't want to come out of our rooms and we were quite scared. We didn't know what mood he was going to be in. Then again, at the time, we never knew it was bipolar. The first memory that I really have that I know something was wrong was when I was around 3 years old. Of course, I didn't understand back then, but it was a memory that stuck with me until this day. I remember my dad having an episode and he was really angry, but then I just didn't know why. As I got older, I started to notice a lot more patterns. Like when dad was going really well, he was going really well. He would take us to sports games, we'd laugh and play. Everything really felt normal then. He would try and teach us how to do karate, read us books, help us with our homework. But then the low times come, and he was in his depressive episodes. He would retreat, sleep a lot, and just not be who he really was. It was like he was there, but he really wasn't. And again, this was really hard for me as a child to really understand. My mum always did her best to explain things and try for us not to see as much as we did, but it got to a point where it was too hard to hide. Back then, mum thought that dad had bipolar, but the doctors or no one really said anything about it. Now we come to the age of 12. Already for a 12-year-old, what I experienced at that point and my siblings was already shaping our future and shaping the way that we became as children. While there was always so much love, there was still the anxiety and the uncertainty. The next major episode that I remember was the first time he was admitted to an institution, but we still didn't know it was bipolar at this time. This was all in a time where I feel like mental health was such a stigma. It wasn't talked about, especially in males, and my dad was always such a proud man, come from a very proud and loving family. I often think if it was different times, if it was now, would he have been more accepted for his illness? I can't take back. I can just share my story in this podcast in the aim to help somebody else. After this episode, he didn't come back home for a while. He stayed with some family. Then when he did come back home, things seemed to be all right. He always tried so hard, even though his mind was in constant battle. He always tried so hard to do his best. Growing up as the older sibling, I always felt that I had to be the stronger one. I just wanted to be strong for them. I didn't want to burden anyone how I was feeling, so I just kept it to myself. At times, I feel like I'm glad that I was the oldest one, so they didn't notice a lot of the things that I did. I guess the hardest thing was for me growing up was I didn't understand why one day my dad was one person and the other day he was another person. Well, I guess not until I got to my age now. This is when I started to develop my own anxieties and OCD tendencies. It was a way to cope with the chaos, and I didn't really know back then, but I was trying to control the things in my life because everything else felt out of control. What I'm going to talk about now is quite serious, and it's going to be a major trigger warning for suicide, but this is something that really changed everything for us. This was the day that changed our whole lives. Back when I was 15, my mum decided that it was enough and was moving out with us kids. My dad was obviously very sad about this, and I think that he just didn't know how to process any of it, but it just got too much for us to be around. I got to a point where I would speak up and talk to my mum and tell her that it was really hard to live here. Mum could see how much it was affecting us, and she tried to be strong for so long and deal with it, but it just was too much. But nothing could have prepared for what was happening next. One morning, I woke up to mum and dad screaming. It was just a normal school morning, so I went out to see what was happening. And then I saw my dad pouring petrol around the house and told us to get out of the house. At this point, my siblings were waking up as well, and we were just all screaming and in panic. As he locked the back door and kicked us all out of the house, we ran to the front of the house. Couldn't believe what was happening. I just thought, he's inside. He's inside the house. And then the next second, the whole house lit on fire. It felt like forever, but it was really only a few seconds. And then he came out of the house. At this point, this event shattered our family. After he came out of the house, he was rushed to the ambulance and we were told to say goodbye. I never really realized it until I processed it a few years ago of just how much that event actually affected me. Being a teenager, I kind of just moved on from it. I didn't move on properly, but I just didn't really know how to process it. As we did therapy and spoke to our family, it was more just I bottled it down and went on with it. As I said before, I always felt like I had to be strong and, I can't put more of a burden on my family when they've already gone through the burden that we did with my dad. As this was a really, really dark time, there is some light on the other side of it. After the fire, my dad had to recover. It took him years to get back to himself, but he was burdened with the scars to 80% of his body and all over his face. This was something that he now needed to live with. At that time, he realized that he didn't want to die and that he wanted to live for us kids, and slowly he started to turn his life around. I knew it was never easy for him and he had a lot of setbacks, but he really, really tried. He dedicated most of his life to charity. He really helped a lot of people, worked for the Burns Foundation, and he brought out a light in himself that we'd never seen before. I'm going to finish this episode a little bit shorter. This has been a lot for me to talk about, and as I said earlier on, I always feel a lot of energy in this situation. It's really brought out a lot of remembrance of that day, but stay tuned because this is only part 1 of my story. Next week, I will share with you part 2. And I'll take you through the years that followed. There was more ups and downs. We really needed to rebuild the family. Thank you for listening to this. I really appreciate you being along on this journey with me. I would love your support. Please subscribe and I'll see you next week.